In a story that I covered on Thursday on the 6 Minute Daily, which is a live program every single weekday, if you're unaware, you can check it out just by subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications. You'll always see it there. But interestingly enough, during that particular live stream, we talked substantially about what Warner Brothers was doing, a major restructure that was going to divide up their company into different divisions that could easily be separated or at least have elements parted from them without really much fuss. If you're Warner Brothers Discovery, that's probably the best way forward. It's also the best way forward if you have a nuisance property that you want to get rid of, maybe have somebody else take it in part and do something else with it. In the case of Warner Brothers Discovery, that part is CNN. But of course, we talked about it previously a week ago that maybe NBC Universal wants to part with some pieces as well, like MSNBC. Well, this is the way you go about it, and here's the reasons why. Let's jump into this story coming to us from Breitbart and our good friend over there, Nolte. That's right. Nolte writes this great story here all about Warner Brothers Discovery looking to split from toxic TV assets like CNN. Do you blame them? I certainly don't. Cable networks like CNN were once the key asset in the entertainment world. It's true. Now they've become toxic, which is why Comcast unloaded them last month, and Discovery Warner Brothers, is now looking to do the same. Well, of course they are. Of course they are. Warner's on Thursday said it was reorganizing its corporate structure into a global linear TV division, separate from its streaming and studio division. At least that was reported by The Hollywood Reporter. The studio said that it will begin the early steps towards the new corporate reorganization immediately and expects to complete the initiative in mid 2025. My guess this will be done much, much sooner. In a sign of just how embattled the pay TV business is, the move by Warner Brothers Discovery follows rival Comcast unveiling a plan to spin off its less lucrative cable networks away from its film and TV studio entertainment and parks business, which makes sense. Universal is following the former Disney map and getting rid of things that are not valuable. They're not acquiring more things that are not valuable, which I often find strange. Disney seems to buy things and destroy them, or they buy things and just deal with the unprofitable things, as an aside for a long, long time, just letting them kind of limp along, which is what Disney's doing with a lot of the Fox acquisition right now. And funny enough, we mentioned Disney. It's mentioned here in the article that Disney's CEO, Bob Iger, has already floated this same idea for what's left of Disney right now. The overall report adds that WBD's plan appears to be spinning off its linear TV assets into separate holding companies so the core of the company can return to growth. Because, as anybody can see, if you have old linear networks that you've treated so very badly, they're in rough shape and in need of, extra help. And they oftentimes drag down successful segments of your business just because they exist and need maintenance and special care for all the deferred maintenance they've experienced. Sounds like a Disney theme park now, doesn't it? And in quite a bit of transparency, the report points out that the cable packages or bundling have fast fallen out of favor with consumers who've spent instead on individual streaming services, which are actually turning into bundled cable. Whether or not anybody else is paying attention to that, I don't know, but I certainly am. Last year alone, major pay TV companies collectively lost about 5 million subscribers combined. And Comcast alone lost 2 million subs, which kind of explains a lot. Of course, the question, what's going on here, is rather simple. The good news is that Hollywood is going to have no choice but to produce TV products people actually want. If they don't, we won't subscribe to their streaming outlets, and streaming is the future. At least that's what they've decided to sell themselves. None of this is something that had to happen. They could have preserved linear forever through cable and satellite and antenna television, but instead they opted to the single delivery point, which is really limiting the amount of earnings potential they can have across the board. But that's probably a subject for another day. You see, pay TV or linear TV or cable or satellite TV were cash cows for decades. Why? Well, because of the monopoly of cable forcing us to make bundles of different packages, oftentimes with things or channels we weren't very much interested in. That left dozens and dozens of networks that were unwatched and yet seemed to be and were part of advertising packages that advertisers didn't really understand were really not paying the bills. Nevertheless, because of those networks as part of the cable packages, you're still forced to pay for them. In fact, for a long time, whether or not you had the sports package or not with ESPN, you were still subsidizing ESPN because, well, there was no other way to get it on cable carriage deals for all the other interested subscribers. And if you didn't have ESPN, you didn't last very long. This is all a part of something that the article here talks about, which is a carriage fee. And those carriage fees, well, they had all these channels included within them, like CNN, MSNBC, Comedy Central, and more. They artificially kept all those on life support for a very long time, not to mention the old airport deal that CNN had alone, which basically meant CNN owned television in the airport and in some other places as well because they paid for it. But the worst news for Hollywood is that the streaming wars that they willingly participated in for no reason that benefited them returned merit to a position of power. Disney and Comcast and Warner Brothers Discovery can't do with their streaming services what they did with their terrible cable outlets. They can't force us to subsidize them. In fact, I'm probably going to opt out of a couple of streaming services later this week as you're watching this video. And that means they have to attract their customers, which means they have to make good things. Disney certainly doesn't make good things. And I think a lot of the subscribers are starting to figure that out, whether or not you're enjoying Skeleton Crew. And a lot of people think it's relatively inoffensive, despite some of the more ideologically minded inclusion in that show. I will tell you that it's not scoring a whole lot of ratings. In fact, it didn't even chart for the second week in a row, which means the first three episodes were dismal failure. So just picture the 25 million that we've talked about that have abandoned linear television over the last few years and escape the bloated cable bills just to maintain an internet bill that was equally stiff. The loss of those carriage fees are taking away the umbilical cord for a lot of these fading, dying networks. And with that goes billions and billions of dollars a month. That's obviously going to tear up Hollywood's bottom line, in addition to all the cable providers out there who are going to be paying carriage fees for things that, well, aren't going to benefit them one iota. And as pointed out here by Nolte, the cable networks are basically just a drag on the stock price and the overall earnings performance of any of these companies, which means you got to get rid of them. By simply splitting off those networks from Warner Brothers Discovery's mothership, they won't be dragging down the mothership anymore. They'll be dragging down some kind of spin off company made up of all those dying embers of what used to be linear channels that people may have at one point in time enjoyed. This also gives other interested parties a used car lot of channels to pick from if they're looking for something to round out maybe some losses that they can write off for the next several years. There are companies that like to do that, and I wouldn't put it past Elon Musk, probably not CNN, although that's a possibility. More likely MSNBC, which will take more poison out of a well that, well, just poisons the country as a whole. And finally, as Nolte points out towards the end of the article, the move to streaming is a return to a business model where, well, the people on the extreme ideological side, the entertainment companies that is, must make content that people actually want to watch. Again, a return to merit. This is actually a cultural victory for normal people, whether or not they know that or not. Or for normies out there, this is a huge win that you will benefit from for decades to come, provided these media entities continue to survive, which they're doing their level best not to. Watch the takeover of YouTube and their attempt to try to get in on that racket, except for one problem. They're not authentic. They're not me. And that's kind of what people are looking for. Anyway, that's my end of the conversation, but it's not yours. We're now at fan participation, and that's you. In the comment section below, let me know what you think will be the next step in the elimination of all these terrible networks. Do you think CNN will be acquired by someone else? MSNBC? Somebody? Do you really think Elon has the interest of launching a network that already has a carriage deal in place that likely will lock it into something very, very successful and an immediate competitor to Fox News? I think that would be intriguing. Once again, let me know your thoughts and hopefully we can have a conversation on this one because I think it's worth it. And while you're down there, double check you're subscribed. There's about 45 to 50% of you, somewhere in there, it fluctuates, that are watching my videos but aren't subscribed. Do me the favor, take advantage of the free subscription offer. Click on the red button, turn it to gray, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any video, live stream, or anything else goofy that I do, which there's a lot coming up because I'm going to be at TPUSA this coming weekend, and I think you're not going to want to miss it. Lots of live streams, I imagine, and perhaps some interesting interviews. On that note, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, and until next time, see ya.